because it's easier to upload it that way. Remember, the lecture PowerPoint is in Blackboard under course content, and so you can click on that and follow along with me as I'm going through it, through the slides. And I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about that time period and the literature of that time period. Of course, we have a good amount of poetry and short essays that I assigned for this week, and we do have a Blackboard Collaborate session coming up tomorrow from 12 to 1. I posted the announcement in Blackboard, and as I have previously advised, my schedule has shifted because my daughter is no longer in school, and so I'm trying to accommodate and make arrangements, and so I really can't do the Tuesday night sessions that I was normally teaching class with. So I've decided that 12 to 1 on Thursdays, which is the lunch hour, is probably going to be the best for me. And so I'll be on during that time each week from now to the end of the semester. And then I'll also make sure those sessions are recorded and then ensure that you can look at them if you're not able to get on at that time. And so if you can, that would be great. If you cannot, I totally understand. I know everybody is in different circumstances as a result of the virus. So please know that whatever you can do is fine. We are just going to try to work through it. Just some housekeeping things. Please make sure you're checking Blackboard. I did post the Blackboard discussion question, and I'll post the quiz after I complete this lecture. And I did give you all an extra day for the quiz since I'm posting the quiz today and not on Tuesday. You'll have until Saturday to take the quiz, and I'll post a little announcement right there where the quiz will be. And again, there'll be quizzes that are in Blackboard. Obviously, you can use your notes, refer to the information that you have. So just make sure that you get that done. Also, be advised that the university has announced a pass-fail for this term or semester, and that simply means that if you have an A, B, C, or D, you're going to get passed. The only person that will get an F is if you have a 59 or below. So keep in mind, because we're doing P's and F's for this term, whether you have an A or a D, you're going to have a P. That's essentially what it means. So for those that have already done extra credit, I hate to kind of tell you this, but the extra credit really only helps those who are failing to get them above to that P if they need it. But if you have a D or above, it's not going to show A, B, C, or D. It's just going to show a P. So thank you for doing the extra credit. I hope it enriched your life and your experience by having attended the event or written on that particular item that you did. But it will not show the same effect as it would when we normally do it during the semester, because we're not doing A to B or C to, B to A or C to B. It's just a P across the board or an F. Okay. So please note that. But if you have turned in extra credit, like I said, I will apply it. It's just you won't really see the difference, because unless you're failing, that's the only way that it'll get you to the P. But if you already have a passing, you just already have a passing. Okay. I think those are the major things. I'm still getting grading done. I'm trying to create content at the same time that I'm doing grading. So that's the holdup. 12-week grades are due next week on the 7th. So I've given myself some breathing room to not be so pressured to get all the grades in as soon as possible, because we do have until the 7th. But I've told everyone that's emailed me, if I've emailed you back, that I'm just going to go by the 12-week grade mark. And so you should see everything in by that point. And then if you don't see something you should have, then reach out to me. But otherwise, I'm going to give myself the freedom to take all the time that we're being given, because I'm having to create content for the online classes while at the same time also get the grading done. Okay, so I think those were the major things that I wanted to talk about. And I am pulling what I'll be discussing from the PowerPoint and the textbook. We are still in book 1. We're going to transition to book 2 shortly. But all the reading and the poetry that we do, which we'll discuss in the Collaborate section on tomorrow, again, I gave the page numbers. It's coming from this particular textbook, which is the Norton Anthology, Volume 1. Okay, so the Harlem Renaissance. We're all pretty familiar with this time in Black history, because this is the time where we see, the Cotton Club, we see the rent parties, all of the wonderful kind of artifacts that come from this movement, the jazz, the dancing, even the fashion of this time period. Of course, many of us have seen Harlem Nights. So, this is just a great period in time in African American history and also in African American literature. This is when we see almost like a birth of wonderful creativity, artistry, expression. It's a great time to be a Black American if we remove the kind of horrible tensions within society as a result of racial oppression and Jim Crow and all these other things that are at work to kind of crush the spirit of Black lives since the Emancipation Proclamation and the abolition of slavery. If you remember the lecture from last week, we talked about the formation of the Black church. We talked about the Great Migration, which gets Blacks basically from the deep South into these northern industrial areas, and Harlem essentially becomes this mecca where people come together because, look, this is a place where not only can different types of Black Americans congregate and live and build community, but there are also jobs there. And so by the 1870s, white supremacy was ruling the Reconstruction South, and that meant that Blacks had to essentially flee, more or less, to get away from the lynchings, from all of the horrible forms of violence that were taking place, and just the refusal to accept Black Americans as human beings. So Harlem is essentially 3 miles of Manhattan that is boasting during the 20s hundreds of thousands of African Americans, and it's one of the largest concentrations of Black people in the world. So people are coming together during this time, and they are descending upon this space and place, and it bursts the Harlem Renaissance. And we know it as a time of creativity, of artistic expression. The District of Harlem basically fuels much of what we see developing as the essentials of African American culture. It's moments of unusual fertile cultural activity, poetry, fiction, drama, essay, different musical art forms, painting, sculpture. The arts are exploding during this time, and African Americans are forming a sense of confidence and purpose, and also a greater sense of achievement. They are putting out and producing works that are touching not only Black America, but the rest of the Black community, and then the nation at large. Okay, this is something to keep in mind. Prior to the Harlem Renaissance, we had World War I, and there was an unprecedented amount of African Americans who served in the armed forces. The book tells us 350,000 soldiers were African Americans. So we see during this time that soldiers have served, and then they are coming back to the States, and segregation is rampant, discrimination, lynchings. So all of these horrible things are present when Black Americans are returning from the war. During this time, we're also seeing a new generation of Black thinkers who are really critical of what's going on in politics and in our society. And then we're also seeing the presence or emergence of kind of the global Black identity or Black experience. And that means that we have thinkers that are coming out of the Caribbean. Of course, many of us are aware of Marcus Garvey, and we even had one of your classmates who did a presentation on Garveyism. But this idea that during this time and from this time forward, we're seeing Negroes in America really gaining a global perspective. And so we're not thinking of ourselves in this small microcosm that is the United States, but we're thinking of Negroes in the concept of world citizens and not just local citizens. Excuse me, I'm sorry, my throat is a little scratchy. One of the key figures, of course, is Alain Locke, who authored The New Negro, okay, which is a very important anthology. And Locke talks about the idea of large-scale cooperation between blacks all across the world. So not just looking at things as problems that speak to African Americans, but problems that speak to the larger population of African people. And that's really important to think about when we consider that. Remember, what we know of Black people in slavery, typically when we're talking about the slavery and freedom in the United States, we're typically talking about the United States, but we know the slave trade extended well beyond our borders. We know that there were several ships that went past the United States. And so we know there's a great Afro-Caribbean heritage as a result of the slave trade and colonialism extending beyond the United States to places in South America, to the Caribbean, and other areas southern to our country.